with you, Mel, as someone who has to write about Liverpool on a pretty daily basis. It's probably been a bit of a long week for you there. Are you expecting there to be more activity for you to write about this week?
I think Jurgen Klopp practically said it himself that the club have to be patient at the moment, given the level of business they're doing. But the other interesting thing that he said was we're doing a lot behind the scenes that probably we can't see, we don't know about. And I think, following the Virgil van Dijk situation, a lot of stuff will be kept as quiet as possible. So even though there may not be continuous updates, I don't think that's a sign that things aren't happening. One of the things I always connect the dots with is when a club are constantly having to come out and say somebody's not for sale or this is our stance, like Borussia Dortmund did with Christian Pulisic as well. Obviously that's because that is how they feel about the situation, but they're forced into saying it all the time. So I think there will be work being done behind the scenes. Annoying that, like you say, there's not much to report on, but I don't think that's a sign that not much is being done.
It's what sort of gets my attention on this, Jay, is, obviously it's strange because I'm about to talk in a minute and I'm going to say there's only a month until the first game of the season, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's noticeable that Chelsea still haven't signed a player. City had the early rush of excitement, but they got those two in and they haven't done anything else since. We've got two in. The only club who are finding it quite straightforward, I think, in terms of signing people appears to be Everton, and there's a couple of specific circumstances around that, partially the sort of profile of player that they're going for. Let's be clear about this. If Liverpool wanted to sign Klassen, they'd have signed Klassen. That could have been, that could be done. So people are, sort of impatient about it, want to see this sort of thing happen. But we're currently sitting here and Spurs have bought no one, and I think this is the next sort of 2 weeks are going to be the time by which I think the manager will be wanting to feel as though he's getting his players in, or if not, moving on to other targets.
Well, yeah, because we're trying to sign good players, or like really good players, and when you're trying to sign a really good player, other people are interested in the club who are selling them, don't want to lose them in the first instance. So I think you're right that I don't think we should be too concerned that it hasn't happened. It does seem to get earlier and earlier. These players have contracts up until the 1st of July, and yet you're still announcing them usually in May and June, and I find the whole thing baffling. And I can understand if some of the selling clubs, as was the case in Van Dijk, just stand up for it sometimes and say, we're not having this. This is ridiculous. We're not going to make it that easy for you. Similarly, Liverpool do and will want their business done. We're going the season, as you say, starts in a month, but you need them players in. You don't really want to be bringing them in just before the window closes and the season started. Klopp's clearly got a sight set on just a few really good players, and we'll want them for the full duration of the season. But I think all of this, the context for it is people's reaction to it, isn't it? And the Van Dijk thing is going on, the Keita thing's going on. Will he, won't he kind of thing. But that happens when you sign really good players. Gareth Bale. I'm not trying to say these are in any way correlate, but when Gareth Bale was going to Real Madrid, it wasn't so straightforward. When big clubs are signing players for huge transfer fees, it isn't straightforward, and maybe people just need to take a moment and remember that.
The other thing that strikes me on it, Dan, is that there isn't a ton of links with alternatives. That's the main thing. I think Keita is a bit of a special case anyway, and that I think that the manager just really likes him, and everyone thinks he's really good, and he'd just have him. And if he may well end up going for another midfielder at some point. There's talk of Oxlade-Chamberlain and all that sort of stuff. But I think those things aren't linked. It's not like if he gets one, he'll go the other one. I think he'd just have them both and go from there. Van Dijk, there isn't a ton of other centre halves being linked to Liverpool, which you would have thought there would be. It does sort of smack of, firstly, Liverpool wanting those players to know, you're our guys, we want you. But secondly, sort of still being relatively confident that they will end up being Liverpool players when maybe we're not. It could be that the club's not properly prepared. It could be that they're not looking at contingencies. It could be that people aren't doing the job properly. People listening might think that's the case. The alternative is that they remain sort of pretty confident that they'll get the manager's first choices.
Yeah, I think people always tend to sort of approach these kinds of things in a negative way. So we'll look at Liverpool not having signed 3 or 4 players by this point as, or well, they're slouching, or they haven't been doing the job properly. I think it's just because people have that sort of fateless mentality where they especially since the previous set of ownership, it's sort of instilled in all of us to be very distrustful of any kind of authority around Liverpool Football Club. So I think that's where it comes from. I also think there's just a sort of sadistic element to it where people like being angry, especially in the summer when you can't be that happy about anything, because even if you go and sign, even if Liverpool were to buy Lionel Messi, they don't intrinsically gain anything from it. You can't
You can't watch
have
him.
a bus tour for
Doesn't
that.
score
You can't have
goals. Doesn't score goals that early.
Whereas you can get angry about them not doing things. But the other way to look at it would be, if they are only looking at this particular set of targets and they're just working quietly and quite methodically and slowly behind closed doors to do it, then that's first of all showing patience and also determination to get the right people, which I think different Liverpool regimes, different managers, different ownerships, the whole stuff with the transfer committee probably didn't used to do, and people used to get frustrated with that, in that they'd have one target, get the knockback, and then end up getting someone else. So where Liverpool wanted somehow, they'd end up with Jermaine Pennant and stuff like that, and that seems to be sort of what some people want them to kind of go back to, just to get someone, as opposed to necessarily the one that they really, really want, which I think is a bit strange.
And it's not what Klopp said he'll do as well. Klopp said he'll make do with what he has if he can't sign the player he really wants, and he done this by putting James Milner left back last year.
Yeah.
And I think our fans can't get their head around that, because what they say is, well, there's got to be a better James Milner out there. There's got to be a better left back, even if it's not the one we want. There's someone better than James Milner. So they apply a very almost basic view of it.
And very short term.
But Klopp's probably saying to himself, well, no. It's like Neil's thing about, whether there are or aren't other centre-halves that are out there. And I think it's quite good if Klopp's sure he only wants one. Even if I'm not sure on Virgil van Dijk, it has put in me some kind of positivity that, well, Klopp must be really sure he wants this lad. However, that doesn't mean our fans need to, just give them a blank check. But you don't need to just be on the case so much. You don't need to just, be shouting down the banks, why aren't you signing this player? Well, if you can't get Van Dijk, go and sign someone else. Well, there's probably a reason why you can't just go and sign somebody else, because they're not available, they're not interested in Liverpool. Maybe their wages don't fit with Liverpool's model or what Liverpool are offering. Now, whatever you think is right or wrong with that, that's the parameters we're operating in when we go to sign a player. You're not going to change that by tweeting Mel saying, why haven't you signed Virgil van Dijk just yet? It's really it's just too much. And I think you're right, since the last owners, this distrust, people have got this voice and they feel they need to use it all of the time instead of just saying, all right, let's wait and see. I've had people tweeting me, what are you going to do if the owners don't sign players this summer? It's like, mate, it's July. I'm currently still thinking whether I'm going to go away in August. The transfer window doesn't close until the end of August. We've got ages if we want to kick off. Just wait and see.
I think it's quite important, the point you make, Dan, that the emphasis is definitely on improving quite substantially what's already at the club. There's no point in bringing in padders or trying to think to yourself, if we really feel that these are the players that are going to elevate us and take us to the next level, we're having a little bit of frustration, let's just move on to 2, 3, 4, just continue going down the list, because it puts you at the same place you've previously been. You've had history of buying squad players, them not being good enough, and then you're not, as a club, kicking on because you've chosen to go down that route. I think being patient, sticking it out, being confident, being determined, like you said, doing your work behind the scenes, doing everything it takes to try and get those things over the line first, and until you reach the point where you're convinced there's absolutely nothing left, nothing else you can do to get them in, you've got to keep going for it, because you've identified, and there'll be reasons they've been identified. Keita, for example, if you speak to people who work in recruitment, they say that it is very difficult, actually they can't find an alternative for him, because he's 2 players rolled into one practically, because of his offensive and defensive ability, which is equally as good. So if people who work in recruitment are saying that there is no, and I'm not talking about people that work in Liverpool's recruitment, I'm saying recruitment for other clubs, and you can find them on Twitter, the guys from StatsBomb, for example. You have to, if you decide to move on from him, and if you decide to do that out of annoyance that it's not
your whole
happening as
strategy
fast
changes,
as you
yeah.
want. Yeah, you're settling. You've started on such a high base, and then you force yourself to settle for something else. I think impatience is not going to help anyone, whether it be, Liverpool as the purchasing club, the fan base, because it just enhances the frustration. It doesn't help the selling club as well, because there's all this ramped up pressure in a short space of time, which actually just, solidifies their stance a little bit, because it pisses them off that they have to answering the question all the time of whether the player is moving or not. I think, again, speaking to people in recruitment, they've said that over the past 2 summers, so last summer and this one, they've noticed Liverpool being a lot more intuitive in the market, based on who they've gone for, the profile, vision, everything seems aligned. It all seems a lot more unified as well. And they're all confident that if Liverpool continue on this trend to sign, the players who stylistically are made for the vision Klopp has, that it will be a success. Obviously, they have to get the business over the line, but I don't think it's worth getting so frustrated now, especially like you've all mentioned. If you look at the business the rest of the top 6 are doing, it's also been slow for them now. People point at Lacazette as an example of Arsenal doing things quickly. Well, he had agreed to join Atletico Madrid. The clubs had agreed a deal, and the only reason he's not there is because of their transfer ban. He wasn't even Arsenal's first choice. They wanted Mbappe. They've had to settle on him. People use Lukaku as an example as well of business getting done quickly. United wanted Griezmann because of the Atleti's transfer ban. Couldn't get Griezmann. Wanted to get Morata. Real Madrid playing hardball, so they've gone to Lukaku. And Chelsea wanted Lukaku, so that's the Premier League champions missing out on a top target. I think we view things in a little bubble sometimes, and you've got to look out of it and see what else is happening, not just in the Premier League, but in all the top leagues in Europe, to see that it's not a Liverpool-specific issue, this. When you want to get big business done, it takes time.
I think the impatience in the supporter base as well is in many ways based on the position that Liverpool are in now, specifically finishing 4th on the last day of the season. I think people are very anxious that that's taken advantage of.
Understandably so.
And that Liverpool sort of consolidate themselves as a genuine challenger at the top of the table, especially with United and Arsenal being the ones that have missed out this season. So from that comes this sort of desire to get a rush of players in quickly who are very good. But to an extent, we did that last time. We qualified for the Champions League, got a load of exotic sounding names in, and the vast majority of them were crap. Really crap. So I think people sort of haven't quite learned from not their own mistakes but Liverpool's mistakes in the past. I think they sort of view this, or I certainly view it as a change of tact from previous years, and people seem to be unsettled by it and think that it's a negative, and it shows that Liverpool aren't working hard enough, when I would personally take it as them being a bit more methodical and hopefully working hard to get the people that they actually want.
In the final reckoning of this, Jay, will all be either on the 12th of August or maybe for one player, maybe 2 by the 31st of August. It might go that long for Liverpool, but you mentioned before that there will be. It's a strange situation in that you feel as though the desire to get the players, the very specific players, the desire for that is driven by the manager. Yet if those players aren't delivered, you do feel as though there will be some frustration towards the hierarchy of the club, first and foremost, when I think at least it's the manager who's very driven in terms of he wants the lads he wants. He's not a Rafa Benitez where he's got a book of every player in Europe ranked in terms of the order in which he'd quite like to sign one of them. It's very much he's got his own guys. There's no right answer here. There's different ways to run football clubs. Different managers have different ways, but it does appear that Klopp's way is these are my guys, and you'll get me them, and if not, as you said before, I'll solve the problem internally.
I think he'll solve the problem. I think that's where the very public debate, mainly taking place on things like Twitter about our transfer targets, that would be the first time there's some kind of evidence that this isn't all matching up. You know, people when they talk about transfers, this is the context for it, isn't it? People are saying Liverpool aren't spending enough, or they're saying that Liverpool won't spend on wages what they need to get these players. If, you know, Keita was to leave Leipzig, or
Van Dijk
signs for somebody else, but signs for wages that we know Liverpool wouldn't offer, but his transfer fee is around what we know we'd offer, people will say to themselves, well, why didn't we do that? And Klopp may well say that, because he'll say, listen, I wanted these. I haven't gone to get 6 or 7 players. I've wanted 4,
planned
maybe 5
signings.
Yeah. You know, are definitive improvements for the first team, are players that you imagine would go straight into the first team and don't need, you know, a period of time to bed in, you know, are of sufficient quality that even if they weren't at the best they were at the current clubs, they'd still come in and be an improvement for us. That's where there might be some frustration, but people who are expecting Klopp to show that frustration now clearly aren't privy to the kind of conversations that Melissa's just talked about there, about, well, you know, this might just take a bit of time, because what Leipzig are probably saying, you know, and this happened with, you know, Torres talks about this, doesn't he? Liverpool say, don't go public yet, let us get your replacements, because if Leipzig, you know, are talking to these stats people and saying, right, well, if we're going to sign him, we probably need to change the way we play, and we need to go and sign 2 or 3 players to replace him, and 70 million will get us that. They're probably thinking to themselves, well, hang on, who are these 2 or 3 players? We need a bit of time now, because we've been expecting no one to sign him, and Liverpool are persistent, and they're going to get him. The lad wants to go, but they're probably saying to him in Liverpool, give us time. You know, if it's not done in 2 weeks, we'll just sign a deal and we'll sell him to you. But give us time to try and get some targets ready so that we can announce them, because they've got the same pressures Liverpool would have. That if Liverpool were to sell a great player now, if Liverpool sold Coutinho, everyone's reaction would be, how are they going to spend that Coutinho
Who are you getting?
money? Yeah, not just the frustration at losing him. It would be, well, okay, we'll give you the chance. Who are you going to sign? You can't just sign a replacement for Philip Coutinho, because if there was a better replacement for Philip Coutinho out there, cheaper, Liverpool would, that club would have just signed them. So it's not so easy as people make out. And you know, I think people just look at it not just short-sighted, but just, as Melissa says, in their own prism, in their own Liverpool, you know, world of, well, Liverpool want these players, so that should be the end of it. There's
one other thing on this, Mel, which is the Lukaku thing does ever so slightly undo, though I am intrigued by it, and the way which you phrased it before struck me as quite interesting as well. But there is I think, again, the idea that there's almost like there's a market, there's a constant market, it's going on around Europe all the time, and anyone can sort of just intercede and go, well, we're going to go for him, you're going for him, so we're going to go for him. Whereas I think more and more it looks, and if you're going to shop at the high end of this market, which is what we say we want to do, that these players are wooed and charmed over a long period of time. So, you know, Lukaku's got the issues, the specific agents, all that sort of stuff, and I don't want to go into that particularly, but that one does appear to have shifted from the idea of one club to another relatively quickly. But on the whole, it does look to me, at least as an outsider to this process, as though now, you know, the days of sort of speedy deals at the high end of the market are gone. Not even because of the complexity of them, but because you effectively seduce the footballer because you want his talent, and that process takes 3 to 6 months. It doesn't happen in a week and a half.
Yeah, I think if you look at Coutinho as an example, or anyone Barcelona try to sign, and I don't think there's any arguments that Barcelona are one of the biggest clubs in the world, if not the biggest, the one that, you know, most footballers do want to actually join.
Yeah.
And even they go on these long charm offensives where, you know, where their players get involved as well, even former players get involved and come out and say all these nice things about the target. And it is very much like that, a game of chess where you're putting a lot of effort into it, you're putting a lot of intelligence into it, there's a lot of thinking that goes in. And there's a lot of, like you say, it is a process that is, you know, fundamentally has many layers. And it's quite rare, like you say, with the Lukaku shifting from Chelsea to United. I think the other one was the Pedro situation as well, where United thought they were going to get him and then he went to Chelsea. But it is becoming rarer to see those kind of things happening when a target has been identified for a long time. I think the other thing that frustrates people as well is that they assume that Liverpool are the only club whose targets are publicly known, whereas we all know who Man City want to sign. It's been known for ages now. who City wants to sign. We all know United were in for Morata for a long time. The Lukaku thing came as a little bit of a surprise, but I think once the Rooney news came out, it was then quite evident that Lukaku would be going in the opposite direction. So it's not, again, I think it's that viewing things just with a Liverpool lens, whereas Liverpool are operating in a market that, the prices are stratospheric this summer, especially in the areas they want to strengthen in. Centre-back, ridiculous prices all through because there's a scramble in Europe for centre-backs. And I think they're just trying to operate in this sphere as best they can. It's like Dan says, it's a switch in the strategy a little, but I don't think stylistically it is in terms of the kind of player, but obviously in terms of fees and the ballpark and the end at which they're shopping in, it's a change. And I mean, pulling off club record deals that is quite a smashing of the club record, I don't think that can be easy to do.
But don't forget as well, Lukaku said he wanted to leave.
Yep.
Publicly came out and said it. Not like, Virgil van Dijk's told Southampton he wants to leave and there's no quote in there, it's just a source says. Lukaku came out and done an interview. He publicly rejected the contract and came out and done an interview with the date, I think it was Dominic King, wasn't it, at Belfield, or Finch Farm, wherever they are now, saying, he wants to leave, he wants that other opportunity, he wants to move on. So I think if a player does that, it's much easier because you are thinking to yourself, well, okay, we've now got to maximise our value as the selling club. Van Dijk, Southampton are probably saying to Van Dijk, well, if you want to leave, mate, say it. Publicly come out and say it. For go, that money that we'll probably have to pay you if you don't do it. There's all these things that go on behind the closed doors. Van Dijk apparently wants to leave, but he probably thinks to himself, well, I'm not going to say I want to leave and I want to join Liverpool publicly because it might not happen and somebody better might come in and I can go and sign for them instead. Or somebody better might say to me, do us a favour, mate, wait 12 months, we'll sign you next summer. We're interested in you, and he thinks, well, that's a better option for me.
Okay. Want to talk about, but begin to sum this up a little bit and move on to other things. I'm going to get Dan Austin to ring Naby Keita and tell him how great he'll look in our new red kit. It's part of the long seduction. I can't think of anyone better. There is, on this though, I'm going to I think I'm of the view Liverpool to start this summer and haven't come back from the holiday and all that sort of stuff. Dan, Liverpool start the summer, they were interested, it was publicly said, in Salah, Van Dijk, Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain and a dog to play left back. Which of the Salah's happened? Which of the other four do you think actually will happen by the time the window closes?
Dog and a kit at left back, 100%. Yeah. For less than double figures, whoever it is, whether it's Andrew Robertson or if it's someone else, it'll be someone to play understudy to Milner. And I'm starting to think that they definitely will get Oxlade-Chamberlain, just because I think it makes sense in most of the ways. In that you weaken a rival, he's not particularly expensive, it's not that much of a risk. He's not got an awful lot of responsibility on his shoulders. If he's first man off the bench, that's fine as well. So I would say that one. I think there seems to be still a sense of optimism around the Van Dijk thing, but just the wording of that statement makes me think it's an awfully big shift to put that out and then end up getting him anyway. Yeah. So I think the language of that one makes me doubt that one more, and Leipzig's stubbornness over Keita and what's it, Ralph Rangnick, the noises he keeps making. I think that one's probably the least likely in my opinion.
Okay, Jay.
I reckon we'll get Keita. Only because I've probably just convinced myself of it in the head that we'll be playing a midfield for us next year, and it's going to give Klopp a hell of a question to answer about what our midfield looks like. I think it's a player he clearly wants, and I think if you're Keita, as much as you're thinking Leipzig and I think he's thinking this is a step up. No matter how good they played in Germany, it's a step up for him. Yeah, it's N'Golo Kante leaving Leicester despite them winning the league and being in the Champions League and going to Chelsea. It's the Premier League, it's a shop winner. I think he's, without knowing any of it, I think it's the kind of thing you'd expect a player like that to say, yeah, this is the right move for me. I think if you're Van Dijk, you're probably maybe thinking, well, yeah, I'd like to go, but I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna flog myself for it.
Where do you think Keita might?
I think Keita's thinking, hang on, I might not, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of other clubs talking about signing Keita. He's thinking maybe this is my opportunity, a la Leicester players last year. I bet you Mahrez and Vardy probably wished he'd have moved on last year now and taken that chance. I think a left back seems a given, but what kind of left back you get? But I'm not too concerned by that. I'm not too concerned that if we don't sign those players, I don't quite get the 70 million for Van Dijk. I just even though it's these numbers are just numbers on a spreadsheet now, I don't quite get it in terms of the agency for that kind of money. I think I can only assume, as I say, I'm positive about it because Klopp's really sure he wants them. But I think it'll be the midfielder, Keita.
Okay. Which of the four do you expect, Mel?
So difficult.
Hold you to this.
Definitely a left back. As things stand, Robertson is the one under consideration, but I think they'd be looking at others and looking to see if they can do any more in that situation before definitely settling on whether it will be him.
Ryan Sessegnon joined Spurs yet?
No, he's signed a new deal at Fulham.
Yeah.
He's happy. He's doing next season
at Fulham. Is that a proper new deal, or
Yeah.
is that a new deal so he can leave?
No, it's a proper new deal.
Oh, okay.
He's doing another season at Fulham.
I think Leipzig are being incredibly stubborn over Keita. I don't think that is a bluff. I don't think it obviously strengthens their bargaining position or whatever, but I don't think it's a bluff. They do want to build around him. The only thing they don't have, they've got money, they have a good squad, they play good football. They want to be a super club, but they have no status at the moment, and that's what they're trying to get. But Liverpool can give him that. Automatically, Liverpool don't have to work towards it. Yeah. I think that happens just purely based on determination to get it done. I think it's really, really difficult to do, and no one should underestimate how much of a pain it's going to be and how exhausting it will be, but I think that happens. Van Dijk is a very difficult one because of what's gone on, and I think what's gone on can't only be viewed in its circumstance of tapping up apology, but the business that Southampton and Liverpool have done. Southampton are sick of Liverpool taking their players, understandably so. So I think that is probably, as things stand, the most difficult one to get over the line, even though, he's wanted to move to Anfield. I just think the situation between the clubs makes it quite taxing. Oxlade-Chamberlain, Arsenal were confident about 3 weeks ago-ish, that he would sign a new deal. They were offering him a good package, a lot of money. He wanted guarantees. It keeps shifting, sort of. And at the moment, the noises from Arsenal are that they would keep him, even if he doesn't sign a new contract. They don't want to sell him to a rival. Again, there, though, I think if they continuously struggle to get him to commit to that new deal, then Liverpool are well primed and placed to go and get him.
Okay, excellent stuff. I want to talk about the outs briefly because we, as football supporters, we're all very intrigued by ins. The outs, there doesn't seem to be much shift, Jay, in terms of where we were at the start of the window, and that's again suggests Liverpool's transfer business in general is following the path that it's been expected to follow so far. So at the start of the window, everyone would have said Moreno will go, Saka will go, Markovic will go, Kev Stewart may well go. That's mooted. The one who's a bit and ahhing, you can't quite work it out, and you wonder if it's other business dependent is Lucas. It might be that Liverpool decide to ask him to do one more year, as they will do when he's 73. And there is also the one which hasn't become solid in any way is Sturridge. It doesn't appear, that doesn't appear to be shaking itself out, which would suggest that there's an appetite maybe on both sides that he sticks with his Liverpool career at this stage. That there hasn't been that much of a concrete link. Do you think there'll be any surprises in that, or do you think I've pretty much summarised who's likely to be going?
I think the players you've talked about, but I think there's ones on the periphery then, your Conor Randalls, your John Flanagans and stuff like that. But I think lots of them players, it will either be, this isn't necessarily a view on them, but I think it will either be when other clubs become desperate to sign players, so later on in the window, lesser clubs become desperate to sign
when it all begins to shake out.
They'll start wanting to sign a Kev Stewart because they think he might improve the player they've just missed out on, or you know, John Flanagan might go there on loan kind of thing, or I think it'll happen as and when Liverpool do sign or don't sign players. So I think if you're Albert Moreno, you're probably thinking, I'm going to move on. If Liverpool don't sign a left-back, he's maybe thinking, well, I'm not just going to go for the sake of it, though. So if Liverpool sign a left-back, I know I'm not going to be in and around the first team, fine. But I think if he thinks he can be in and around the first team, he'll live with that. And thinks, well, okay, well, you know, I'm confident I can come in and maybe play a few games.
Back me ability.
Yeah, and, you know, Milner might get injured and I'll be expected to play and then I can play for Liverpool. I'd rather play a dozen, 2 dozen games for Liverpool than, you know, be on the bench in some of those than, you know, go and play 30 games for
a side that's going to come ninth in a division.
Yeah, someone that he's not as thingy for. On some of our players, though, I think it is just as well that they'll believe they're better than those clubs who maybe become desperate. So I think John Flanagan will probably think he's better than some of the clubs that'll come in for him, and I'd argue he probably is. Kev Stewart might think that, but I'd probably think he isn't. Daniel Sturridge, I think this is the big thing for Daniel Sturridge. No club is going to want to sign him that he's good enough for, and nothing you can say to him will make him think it's the right club to go for, because if he's fit, he plays for Liverpool, and he knows that himself.
Yeah, I think a lot of it as well, like Jay said, will come down to, especially the players on the fringes, how many clubs have missed out on their targets and how far down their list they're going for. The other issue as well is that Liverpool are pretty strong on their valuations of the players going out, and it never used to be the case in the past. So I think it's a welcome change from them, because, you know, the other big clubs do it as well, maximise their exits. Mamadou Sakho, they want around £30 million for him. And, you know, when they look at the Michael Keane deal, they're thinking, well, we're within our rights to do that. Yep. We're talking about a pedigreed defender who's
French
got
international.
Exactly, European experience. And, you know, they say to Crystal Palace, if you want him, which Crystal Palace do, I know they've said before that they've ended interest, but he is still their top choice. The only issue for them is the fee. But given what he did on loan there, and the risk you take by signing a centre-back for a lot less from another league who you don't know how they're going to come in and settle in the Premier League.
It's noticeable, just to interrupt you on that, actually, reading the runes of the transfer, sort of the way in which that works, it's noticeable that that's the sort of signing that Brighton, Huddersfield and Newcastle are making, whereas Crystal Palace, who last season were in a relegation scrap with those sides until the bitter end, are linked with Mamadou Sakho, and if they want to not be in that relegation scrap and be with those players, there's the players you gamble on. So, for instance, Jorgensen going to Huddersfield is a gamble signing. Might work, might not. Looks like he's a good player, but sometimes it just doesn't work. Whereas Sakho, it's less of a gamble for Crystal Palace, and and Palace need to find a way to set themselves as 15-20 points better than, for instance, Huddersfield.
Absolutely, and the other thing that makes his valuation feel close to what it should be is, like we mentioned before, there's a scramble for centre-backs across Europe.
Yeah.
So clubs are going to be losing their top centre-backs to other clubs that want top centre-backs and will thus need a replacement. And he will be featuring quite high on a lot of radars because of, like we said, his pedigree, experience, ability. And then, with Alberto Moreno as well, a high price to pay for a left-back, especially if you're a European club. If you're in La Liga or whatever, you always think you can get a cheaper option somehow, some way. But then as you start missing out on your targets, he then becomes more of an option. Italian clubs have looked at him. He prefers a return to Spain. With Daniel Sturridge, like Jay mentioned, it depends on the caliber of club that comes in for him. PSG wanted him on loan in January. Liverpool didn't want to let him go on loan. And I can see him staying if there's nothing suitable that he finds suitable or that Liverpool finds suitable for him. And if anything, perhaps a loan move to someone like a PSG if that's on the table and he feels he's not going to play as much. But I think the outs aren't as taxing at the moment because of the nature of of the players at the club who will leave. Yeah.
I'm stupidly excited about the idea of Sturridge staying. You know, like I'm just almost about like
I think everyone,
by
no
March,
matter how much you think his legs are gone,
Yeah.
would be secretly delighted with it.
Yeah.
Well,
I also like it for all the people who are like, it will probably piss off, who don't think he's that good. I have one of mate who I know it'll probably piss off because he's convinced he's lazy, and I'm like, mate, he was brilliant against West Ham. Just watch that game again.
and worked, movement was brilliant. I mean, I'm genuinely, like, by March, I was like, there's no way Sturridge stays, there's no way Sturridge stays, there's no way Sturridge stays. And then when he ran the keeper against West Ham, I'm like, this is the best day of my life.
What on the strikers though? It is an interesting point, isn't it? Because you've got Origi, who people are probably looking at thinking flattering to deceive at times, or still in there, he's still young, give him a chance kind of thing. He's got all the attributes. Danny Ings, you'd expect, he's a player that I look at and think he's a Jurgen Klopp player.
Mike Neville will be fuming with you for saying that, but
But I think he is. I think, but I think there were times even in Klopp's first season when I'm thinking he would make a difference here, particularly the way he was playing. Because again, you can only go back to the way he was playing pre-injury the first time round. But
he's a clever player, isn't he? Good movement.
Yeah, that poor lad. Yeah, and he plays off someone's shoulder, and he's just in and around the box stuff. That poor lad though is not going to get his chance at Liverpool now. I can't see. And if he does stay, because the signing of Solanke from Chelsea, Liverpool must have offered him something. He hasn't come to Liverpool to only go and play for our under-23s.
Yeah.
He's been told
you're
gonna get the couple of league games here and there, mate. When players are injured, you're gonna get the League Cups, maybe the FA Cup, and stuff like that. But that's where Danny Ings will play, because we haven't got enough because we've got too many strikers now. So there's a natural thing where the likes of can you see Origi going? Is there any, would there be any way for him? Because I just think, if I'm Origi, I'm thinking to myself, where am I getting my game? If Daniel Sturridge doesn't go, where am I getting my game?
On this, which I think is quite interesting, is the managers. I'm going to come on to the managers' comments in general, but one of the things he said in the last couple of weeks is maybe about playing a couple more systems than he did last season. And I wonder, to me, the most interesting selection of the last sort of 2 months of the season was suddenly, we're going to play a diamond against West Ham, and Sturridge is going to play up front with Origi. As though something in it, I'm going to drop Coutinho deep, as though something in his mind sort of went, this thing will work in this sort of game. And I wonder if it's something that we're going to see a bit more of next season, which might mean that, for instance, if you are Origi or if you are Solanke, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I've got this thing I was talking about. Yeah, but I was talking about it last night. Like, for instance, if you actually just imagine the first week of the season, it's Watford, the Champions League qualifier, and then Palace at home. They're the 3 games. Now, Palace at home has not been a straightforward game for us. Watford away, Marco Silva's first game, doesn't lose home games. It's going to be really hard. And in there's a Champions League qualifier that we've got to win. I'm so, if you begin to actually think, well, will Klopp go with the same side in all 3? That's actually a little tricky to see how that happens. But they're all 3 massive games that Liverpool want to get 6 points from and a good result. No,
but by the nature of particularly the attacking players we've got, this is where the transfers fascinates me, and it probably fits into who might leave. He's not going to, of all the players, each of them is only going to get 1 game out of those 3. So putting Coutinho into midfield is, what does that do for Henderson, Keita, if Keita was to come, Chan, Wijnaldum?
Yeah.
What does that do in Lallana?
There'll be a lot of players you'll get too, but my point is more the idea that if you're Solanke, suddenly you're on the bench in a Champions League game and you might get 20 minutes, which wasn't going to happen for you at Chelsea.
And that's what I mean, but then what does that say to Origi? Because he's probably thinking to himself, well, if Solanke's getting the game, Firmino's not. So Firmino's on the bench. And this will be an interesting challenge for.
So just on this, because I've seen a lot of people talking about this. Do you almost think we've got too many forwards?
I think we've got. Well, depends on the system you play. I know that sounds like a cop out, but it's the system. But I don't think he's going to change it enough and change the players enough to keep them all happy, and particularly the fees you're paying. Salah hasn't come to sit on the bench.
No.
For he might accept in his head that he'll be on the bench for 1 in 5. 1 in 4, but he's not thinking he's on the bench for 1 in 3.
No.
Firmino's not thinking I'm happy being on the bench 1 in 3. Coutinho's not. Lallana's not. There's players that are too good to just be on the bench.
It's our management, isn't it?
So it's incredible. For all those. Let's all remember this in the pink in a month and a bit's time, mate. But I think that's a unique thing within the transfers, and maybe that's why Klopp is thinking, well, if I can't sign these players, I'll live with what I've got, because I'm just moving one headache down the road.
There's just on this quite quickly. I think, in fact, I'll go to you first on this, Dan. I was one of the things that the last 3 seasons, English sides haven't done so well in the Champions League, and one of the things that sort of struck me, we know it's an attritional league. We know that it's different challenges in a lot of senses for the bigger clubs than, for instance, the Spanish league and the German league is. If you're Bayern Munich and if you're Real Madrid and if you're Barcelona, but one of the things that that's occurred to me that's happening here is that we're returning to every side. I think every side that's sort of got top 4, top 6 aspirations, with the possible exception of Spurs, because that's the stadium question and the money question for them, is we all going back to the idea of sort of 20-man, 21-man squads where you'd have conversations around it's going to be able to keep everyone happy. Whereas for the last 2 or 3 years, I think you've looked at everyone, and with the exception of United, you've been able to pretty much go, that's the first 11, there's 3 subs, there'll be some of the lads who'll fill that bench out. That's been the case for City, it was the case for Chelsea last season, who had a really good first 3 subs, but then there was lads on the bench at times you'd never heard of. You know what I mean? Whereas now I think all these Premier League sides, because the intensity, because of how hard you want to run, certainly if you're Jurgen Klopp, I do think we could be in a situation for the first time in a while where we're looking at 21, 22, 20, 23 players.
Exactly, and I think the point you make about Chelsea is interesting, because Chelsea did survive the vast majority of the season with decent luck with injuries on about 14 or 15 main lads. When Liverpool got injuries, they couldn't do the same thing, because they didn't have, first of all, the amount of first team players, and secondly, the quality of first team players in reserve. So if Liverpool had the squad that we assume they'll have this season in January, when they were going to Hull and losing, when they were losing at home to Swansea and all that sort of stuff,
2-2 at Sunderland,
you would assume that Liverpool would have maintained the challenge for longer. And then the games against Plymouth and Wolves in the Cup, you assume would have gone a bit easier as well, because then, as opposed to bringing in the likes of Conor Randall and stuff like that, maybe you're bringing Trent, or you're bringing your new left back that you've got who's a young lad and stuff like that. So I think everyone sort of assumes we need more players because we're in the Champions League, because we've got Europe, and that is obviously a big deal. But also you need more players because you're going to need them in your league campaign, as we saw last season. It's not a case of you can just stick with the same few and go with that, because Liverpool get a lot of injuries, whether that's because of the way they train, whether that's because of the players they've got. I've got a predisposition to it. We've seen over the last 2 seasons that Liverpool have a disproportionately high amount of injuries in comparison to the likes of Chelsea. So they have to deal with that, and they have to deal with that now across 4 competitions. And then that's when you come back to the argument about whether, well, do you keep Danny Ings because Danny Ings can play your League Cup?
But the problem, I think, is we're going to have them players disproportionate to certain ways of playing. So unless he's imagining, if you played 4-4-2, Salah can play on the wing and Mane on the other side, and you play them as out-and-out wingers, we've just got an abundance of players in the front.
Well, what I would say about that is when you were talking about playing the 2 up front and a diamond earlier on, as opposed to keeping an Ings or using a Solanke a lot, wouldn't he just play Mane as one of the 2 with Firmino next to him and stuff like that? So when he talks about systems, I don't think he necessarily means with a load of players swapping around. He might just mean we'll play the way we start for 60 minutes, and then rather than bringing Ben Woodburn on, we'll switch the way we play as opposed to who we play.
But on that, Mel, and just to sort of, it's the point that Dan's driving at, which is that you say you need the more players for the Champions League, but you actually need more players to qualify for the Champions League. Liverpool are scheduled to play 11 league games from Saturday the 18th of November until the 1st of January. 11 league games in that period. There'll also be, if they're through the League Cup, there'll be at least 1 League Cup game, and there'll be 2 Champions League games in the period that I've just mentioned as well. It's an unbelievable, intense run from the 18th of November going right the way through until the 1st of January, and it's arguable that the side that does best across those 11 games could well be the side that goes on and wins the title. It strikes me as last season the manager went with his front 3, got his front 3, and pretty much went with approximately the same way of playing for a long time. He's talked about different systems already and that we might well see them in pre-season, which we're going to come on to talk about in a second. Do you think he's going to change the way in which he goes about his own sort of approach, his own business in the early going this season, and look to sort of to make more changes than we saw last campaign?
I think 2 things about last season which was different. That is obviously that there weren't as many demands because there weren't as many games. There wasn't the burden of Europe, or the excitement of Europe, and so they had a smaller squad for what they needed, which is why he tended to not fix what wasn't broken. What worked at the start of the season was how it was going to carry on, because Liverpool were seeing a lot of joy and a lot of success with that, and only injuries curtailed the way they were playing. The demands are only going to increase this season, and what he expects from his players is a lot, and I can't see him expecting it from them in all those games when he's got a bigger squad, and everyone that Liverpool are targeting is quite flexible. Not in terms of what you typically term versatility, but Salah, for example, just by him and Mane switching gives Liverpool a completely different... in the same game, in the space of a few minutes, if they switch, gives Liverpool a completely different dimension to their attack. So they're quite smart in what they're doing and looking at these players who, Keita, for example, can play 6, 8 or 10. So, you know, if you've got an injury to Coutinho and you're looking for a playmaker, somebody to make things happen, he can do that. If you've got an injury to Jordan Henderson and you need somebody to play as a 6, he can do that. And I think it can look a lot when you're not when we're still in pre-season and we're not in the thick of things, but once you add the injuries, once you add the travel, how taxing the games are, you're going to need those players. And one of the things I think about is when Danny Ings got injured last year, there was comments like, oh, he wasn't going to play anyway. When we got to January, you sat there thinking a fit Danny Ings would have been exceptional to have right now. This is exactly the kind of player you need for this schedule at the moment, the way things are going. So I think having good quality players, of course, you know, they're not going to be happy not getting as much game time, but that's where you have to push yourself. And you said at the start of the show, he mentioned the goalkeepers this morning, and one of the interesting things he said is Karius didn't have the best season, but he helped Mignolet have a better season because of the competition. And I think Danny Ward is just an extension of that, and it will be the same thing with the forwards. They all, if you want to play, when you get your opportunity, you have to be really, really good. You also
have to bounce into training on Monday.
Exactly.
Because there's another fellow who's going to bounce as well.
Exactly. And that entire situation, having the players to push each other, is only going to elevate Liverpool at the end. So I don't think it's something we should look at and be tentative about, but it's to hopefully drive the players.
On the goalkeeper situation, as Mel's very neatly segued for me, Jay, it was interesting. I mean, I've again, maybe a one-size-fits-all on this. I've never really subscribed to the view that goalkeepers need competition. I've always thought goalkeepers need certainty, but it might simply be that Simon Mignolet does. You know, that he's a different type of human being to somebody else. You know, different people respond to different things. And it was an interesting comment from the manager, the idea that, well, it could be any of the three of them. I think we'd all be hugely surprised if it wasn't Mignolet starting the first game at Watford. But the other side of that is that it might be that Jurgen Klopp's thinking, well, the way I've seen it now, the way I get the best out of this fella is by making him feel as though he can lose his place, and that's how I'll keep him honest. I'll keep him going. I'll keep him doing the business for me.
Yeah, and he may also be thinking it's an offer to the other two lads.
Yeah.
Where he might be thinking to himself, and I think comes back to the wider transfer stuff, is he's maybe thinking, all right, well, I'm going to keep you for now, but in a year's time you're out because Arnold's going to come in at right back. And I think the same in the goalkeeping situation, you'd imagine Liverpool might say to themselves, you know, Mignolet's going to drop down to the bench, one of Karius or Ward are going to kick on. Ward maybe either leaves and goes, you know, back to Huddersfield, and you know he plays in and around Liverpool this year and leaves in January or something. I think Karius, you know, if he wants to have a career, he's going to have to kick on, and you're going to want to see a bit more from him. He's going to want to play games. So I think that it's as much to Mignolet as it is to the other two to say, if you get your chance, you're going to have to take it if you want to, you know, have a Liverpool career. So, you know, I'd expect to see at least Karius play early on. I think the challenge will be, and I think just looking at Klopp's words there, he can't possibly give all three a chance. He just can't. It's just too...
Even in pre-season, it's hard.
Even in pre-season, it's going to be too chop change. You know, the thought of changing your keeper after 45 minutes in a pre-season friendly...
Or every half an hour.
Because, yeah, in the 45 minutes, there's a chance the second half there's not going to be a shot.
Yeah.
Or it's just going to suddenly be a complete change when that team brings on all their best players and the pepper in the goal and you look worse. You know, imagine changing every 30 minutes. I can just see Neil and Sammy on Wednesday now, just thinking,
rotating.
What's he doing on 30 minutes here? Danny Ward coming on.
I'm excited about Champion on Wednesday, not least because I think I might get to see Jordan Henderson and Daniel Sturridge play football, and that's never a bad thing. The pre-season stuff is it's the strange games. It is a little bit, Dan. You know, I think it's important not to take too much from them. That's one of my major things. The only thing I have got in my mind is last season, for instance, was when we saw Milner at full back for the first time properly. Was from his first pre-season game. I think in the first one he plays right back, and then he's just at left back, and then that's the way we went. But there will be one or two bits to look out for. But I'm sort of the view, you know, having had a summer without a major tournament, it'll be quite nice just to watch the Reds play football.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think
especially Daniel Sturridge. Can we ensure he plays, please?
I think Neil's going to flounce out of Prenton Park.
Just get off. Get the ferry back.
I think the main notion is of, as you say, having a look at seeing what system he plays and things like that, or noticing any sort of small details about, like, oh, there's this young player that's been brought up. Like, for example, I don't think anyone expected Ben Woodburn to get so many pre-season games last season, which then fed into him playing in the first team. So there might be someone exciting from that regard. In terms of like the quality of how the players play, then no. I think it was Marko Grujic, wasn't it? It was the start of pre-season last season, and then he didn't play for 6 months. Yeah. Or I remember a few years ago, Iago Aspas scored in Steven Gerrard's testimonial against Olympiacos, and then was terrible. So you can't read into the actual quality of the performances, especially considering some of the teams that they're playing. It's going to be Tranmere and Wigan first, isn't it? And then it's like 2 games in one day in Hong Kong, I think. So that's a bit more of a. It's not as serious as it would possibly be. Is it not?
No. It's 2 games, one on the 19th and one on the 22nd.
I think you're thinking of Germany, where they played the day after each other.
Yeah, the day
after.
Germany's back-to-back games.
So it's not. I don't think you can read anything more into it apart from, it seems to have this as a bit of an idea maybe, and in terms of them getting fitness, and also looking at it and thinking, well, we're absolutely sure pretty much that he's not going to be playing for Liverpool in September, but he's clearly playing him in the hope that someone might watch him and think, actually, he's not that bad.
There's on this. I mean,
it's not that bad.
It's going to be
Dan really selling Liverpool players out there.
It's going to well be Alberto Moreno.
It's not that bad.
There is Mel. That, you know, it is quite a strong group who haven't had any international football over the summer. It is quite a strong group who've been back in pre-season since day one. Stronger than normal is what I'm saying, and I think off the back of that, you can probably expect to see slightly stronger than normal sides.
Yeah, I think you can. I also agree with the element of there's not much you can conclude from the early games. I think in Germany is because that's where his real training focus is.
That's the camp, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where you'll sort of glean the best insight in terms of shape that they should start the season with, and the players that should be starting the first game, because we got a good idea of that last summer from the camp. So I'm really excited as well, because it's. I think people have the perception that covering transfers is enjoyable. It's really not until the moment you're breaking a big one.
Until it's real.
But everything else is quite annoying in the build up to it. But the games are different. It's good to see. Good to get that feel again, to talk about the actual football rather than things that are happening off the pitch.
All right. What's coming up there is the pre-season games as discussed. And so this week Liverpool go to Tranmere at Prenton Park, and then on Friday they go to Wigan. And I'm hoping to go to both of them. Not that should matter to you, but we'll be talking about them on Tour Player post-match and just having really quite nice light discussions about them. Just want to talk about the live shows that John and Gareth are working on. There's one on the Friday the 14th of July in Dubai, at Goodfellas. If you can get down for that, if you're in Dubai, if you're listening, Friday the 14th of July, Goodfellas, and bring friends. The more the merrier, the way in which this stuff works. It's lovely to have a great pint, and I know that John's looking forward to that the most. I'm sure Gareth is too. And then on Tuesday the 18th of July, Champs in Hong Kong, John and Gareth, hopefully joined by Melissa. You going, aren't you?
Yes,
Magic.
I am in the Hong Kong show, yeah.
Magic. So they're going to be doing that. Champs in Hong Kong on Tuesday, the 18th of July. So Dubai on the 14th of July, Hong Kong on the 18th of July, and the tickets are from ctickets.com. I mentioned that the post-match shows that we're going to be doing around the pre-season friendlies. I want to point out something else as well. I very much enjoyed my week off and listened to lots and lots of the shows. Well done, Dan. And had a nice time. Well done, Mel, as well. I think you hosted one, didn't you?
Yes,
I
did.
haven't listened to that one, Mel, sorry. Will do.
Heartbroken, gutted.
So, you know, I've got to be honest.
Back down to earth with a pub there, Mel. Well done. Didn't listen though.
On strike.
Turned up.
Putting in a transfer request.
Yeah, you turned
It's
up.
alright, mate. It might be Liverpool. Want to take ages.
But I want to mention the free show last week. This show that you're listening to, that Gareth did. It's part of us shifting our offering a little bit next season. If you like that sort of thing, Gareth's going to be working on them on a pretty regular basis. Stuff that's a little different as part of the Tour Unwrapped strand, which Rob isn't going to present anymore. Rob's going to be presenting something else. Don't you worry at all. You're going to get a lot of Rob Gutman. But there is, you know, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was genuinely insightful. It was a joy to listen to be honest with you, whilst I was relaxing and reclining, and I really enjoyed it. And it, you know, there was a lot of nice comments on it. So, you know, thanks for them. But also to point out, people said things like, you know, this is the sort of stuff that you get from other media outlets, the sort of stuff that you might get on something like 5 Live. Well, I just want to be really honest, really, and say that the aim of the enterprise here, if you're not subscribed, is to be better than that. Is to be better than 5 Live, is to be the best thing, not just at covering Liverpool, but at anything that sort of will get your attention as a football supporter, as a Liverpool supporter as well. That's the aim of the enterprise, and that's what we're trying to do, not just on these free shows, but also behind the paywall. So if you have been and ahhing, the season starts this week, and £5 a month is a nice amount of money for you to part with, to get hopefully lots and lots of insight, lots and lots of stuff that's a huge amount of fun, lots of people sort of showcasing themselves and being the centre of Liverpool Football Club, from the heart of the city, of supporting the club very much. So that's what we're very much about. So if you get the opportunity, if you've been and ahhing, it's a new season and it's a new opportunity to subscribe. But thank you anyway for listening to this, and thank you for listening to Dan Austin, to Melissa Reddy, and to Jay McKenna.